Alright, this is the first day of chapter 2.4, writing linear equations. I don't know if there'll be a second lesson or just a day for us to kind of work on some other things, but either way, today is a mix of review, which is things we know, and then new material, because I don't know if you've seen all this yet. I know I have not seen it in as much or we haven't covered it so much in Algebra 1, but because your best learning comes from practice, let's just go ahead and get to the point. When you write equations of lines, there's a few options to write an equation of a line. Both of them require the use of its slope. I'm going to be teaching the method using slope-intercept formula, which is y equals mx plus b. I think there's something on your notes asking what the slope-intercept formula is. So let's go ahead and get right to that, because again, I think you saw this. I know you actually saw this in Algebra 1. I think it's chapter 5. So again, if you're looking for a touch-up, I'm sorry, I can't spell. Go to Sshsmath. I think 5.3 would be the video that talks about how to do this stuff more in depth from my Algebra 1 videos. Anyway, write the equation of a line with slope of 6 that passes through the point 511. The first thing you want to do whenever you want the equation of a line in this method is just write the formula, which is y equals mx plus b. The next thing you want to do is actually plug in everything you know. So knowing that this is x, knowing that this is y, and knowing that slope represents m, you simply plug in all those pieces. So 11 goes in for y, m is 6, parentheses, x is 5, parentheses, plus b. Make sure you view that as a b, and make sure you don't do that wrong in your notes, because it does confuse people later on. Sorry, I put my 6's with b's. Next thing you do, though, is go ahead and use the algebra. So 11 equals 30 plus b. Moving to 30 from both sides, you end up with negative 19 equal to b. After that, here is your y-intercept, that's what we call it. Here's your m, and so you finish it off with y equals 6x minus 19. The beauty of this is that you can actually check it, and there's no way you should actually miss it, because you can take this 5, plug it in. 5 times 6 is 30. 30 minus 19 matches your 11, and therefore it works. Now on the computer, it's going to actually give you a scaffolding to kind of go through all this stuff. It's going to say substitute. It's going to say simplify and do all that stuff. So again, if you have issues with that to start, please make sure you ask about it, because it's really an easy thing to do. You just have to make sure you master it at this point, because at this level of algebra you need to have it automatic in your system. But what happens if we have a fraction? So write the equation of a line slope of negative 3/4 going through the point 8, negative 1. Again, we start with our y equals mx plus b. My y is negative 1. My m is negative 3/4. My x is 8 plus b. Going through this, negative 1 equals, so we haven't really worked on multiplying a fraction by a whole number. Actually we have, you just did it in the other way, but the whole number always multiplies to the top. So this turns into negative 24 over 4 plus b. Now that simplifies to be negative 1 equals negative 6 plus b. There's another 6 obviously, and then add your 6 to both sides, getting 5 as your answer there. Now you have your answer as y equals negative 3/4 x plus 5. And again, tougher to check, but I still think we should be able to do it. Take the 8, plug it in here. 8 times 3/4 again is your 24 over 4, which is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 5 gives you your negative 1, which means that this is the proper answer that we should have. So again, make sure you master that skill as soon as you can, because you've got to get to the point where whenever it says write the equation of a line and you have a point in the slope, that you can just walk right through this thing as if it's nothing major. This, I believe, is new, because again, I've taught algebra for a long time and I haven't done a lot of parallel perpendicular. I think you get a lot of that in geometry. Two lines are parallel if they have the same slope. Again, this italicized part means, I think that's in your notes. Two lines are perpendicular if the slopes are opposite reciprocals of each other. Opposite, of course, means opposite of 6 is negative 6, so that's your opposite portion. Reciprocals, if you remember, is taking a fraction and, let me write this better in case you're doing it. It'd be changing 6 to a negative 6 or negative 6 to a 6. By the way, it's an arrow. Sorry, I'm a really terrible artist, so let me do it better, even more. These are your opposites. Reciprocals would be taking 2/3 and turning into 3/2. So again, opposite reciprocals, which means switch the sign and flip it over, and that gives you a perpendicular slope. So if you're asked to find slopes that are parallel or perpendicular to an equation, and this is a foundation skill here, this isn't what you're actually going to be asked to do, but if you're asked to find a parallel and perpendicular slope, the parallel slope here is going to be the same. Well, luckily this is y equals m, x plus b. Your m is 5/3, which means parallel is going to stay the same. It's going to be 5/3. The perpendicular slope is going to say take this slope, switch it, and flip it. Well, this is positive, so we need it to be negative, and then we need to flip it over to be 3/5. So again, you have 5/3, negative 3/5. That would be parallel because you use it. Flip it over and switch the sign, and that would be your perpendicular slope. Same thing over here. Your parallel slope, again, easy enough. This is already giving me a slope of 8, so parallel slope is going to be 8. The perpendicular slope in this case is going to be, well, here's what you have to do. You've got to take your 8, you've got to convert it into a fraction. 8/1. And then you've got to take and switch the sign and flip it over. And this is the tricky one for a lot of people once you learn it. But again, take the number, turn it into a fraction. Now once it's a fraction, you can go ahead and flip it over and switch it. So negative 1/8 would be your perpendicular slope for that. The one that we should have learned, I think a couple days ago, even though I didn't really teach it yet, I did do it in class, but now it'll be official, is what happens if I have standard form. Well, remember, standard form is the one where I need to get y by itself. So the first thing I do is I move my 5x by subtracting it. I get 2y equals negative 5x plus 8, because remember, I can put the 5x anywhere I want, and I like my m's up front. Now I divide everything by 2. And in all honesty, you could stop right there because you can see it, but to make it official, that is my equation. So I might have to, in some situations, solve for y, find the slope. Now I can say that the parallel slope is going to be negative 5/2 because it should be the same, and that the perpendicular slope is going to be a positive 2/5 because, again, you switch the sign and you flip it over. So why do we do all this stuff? Everything we just talked about is kind of like a prerequisite for everything that they're going to be asking you to do at the Algebra 2 level of writing equations, because these are the kinds of questions you're going to see now. You're going to be asked to write the equation of a line that passes through a certain point and is perpendicular to the line with a certain equation. Well, here's the thing. We know that when we write the equation of a line, we need y equals mx plus b. The question is, do I have a y? Yes. Do I have an m? No. And I also have an x. So I have a y and an x. But now mentally I am on a quest to find m. Well, they give me an equation and they tell me that the equation is perpendicular to this line. So I have to go over sometimes and go and find this slope by doing what we did up here, or by doing what we did on A and B of that section. So I'll subtract 4x from both sides. I will divide everything by negative 3. Remember that 2 negatives in a fraction makes it positive, so this would be 4/3x minus 3. So that means that this slope is 4/3. Now I've got to do the process. Perpendicular is not the same. Perpendicular is the opposite reciprocal, which means the m that I'm going to use is negative 3/4. I don't know why I can't write. But negative 3/4 is the slope we're going to use here. So now we come back over here and we continue the process. Y is negative 3. M is negative 3/4. X is 6. Plus B, another 6. Obviously, this is something funny going on. Anyway, now we keep going. Negative 3. This turns into 18/4 plus B. And now we have work to do. Well, this is where that fraction stuff that I taught you helps. Sure, we don't like the fraction, but here's what I know. There's a fraction at the bottom. I can multiply everything by 4 if I want to and make my life a little easier. So this ends up being negative 12 equals, remember your 4's cancel, negative 18 plus 4b. And now it's a basic algebra problem that we can just work out. Add your 18 to both sides, you get 6 equals 4b. Then you divide by 4, getting the answer of 3 over 2 equals b. And your final answer is y equals negative 3/4 x plus 3 over 2. The reason you want to master this process and make sure you don't make a mistake over here is because I think it's kind of tough to check this with your actual answer, because yes, I could plug it in, but if my slope is not negative 3/4, then I don't really know if it works. So you could do 6 times this is 18 over 4, or negative 18 over 4, plus 3 over 2, which would be a fraction adding exercise. So negative 18 over 4 plus, making this into a 4, doubling it up, 6 over 4, which makes, I believe, negative 12 over 4, which is your negative 3. And notice that that does match the number that we have up here. But again, if you trust the system, if you work on it all the way through, hopefully you don't have to use too much time checking answers with fractions in them, because unless you have a calculator, it's really not fun to do. And the last level is this, where they just give you an equation. They give you 2 points and they want you to write the equation line to pass us through it. And so you simply have to again ask yourself, do you have information for this formula? Again, write the equation line. Typically will take you, or should take you, back to this formula. Then you look for it. I do have an x, I do have a y. Well, here's the thing, I don't have an m, but I have 2 points. And this is where finding the slope is important. There were 3 different ways. And so what you have to do now is, and I'm going to use the method I used in class just to be consistent, but this is where I had you do the table. And the reason I do the table is because I don't need to memorize a formula once I take those points and put them in a table. It's this minus that, so 27 minus negative 9, and then it's this minus that, which is negative 12 minus negative 8. And I just work it out from there. This will be plus plus, which is 36, plus plus, which is negative 4, which means my slope here is negative 9. So there's my m. Here's my x and y. So now we get back to work. Negative 9 equals negative 9 times negative 8 plus b. This becomes negative 9 equals 72 plus b. Subtract your 72, negative 81 is what you get for b, and from there you simply put them back in. Here's your b, here's your m. Y equals negative 9x minus 81. And again, you can check that. Take this part, multiply here. Negative 9 times negative 8 is positive 72. Positive 72 minus 81 is negative 9. You can also check here. 9 times negative 12, that'll be 18, carry the 1, 108. So that'll be a positive 108 minus 81, which if you subtracted that, there's your 7, here's your 2. Notice that it works and you're good to go. Now I will show you one more piece, because it doesn't matter which point you choose, just to make sure you understand. And you don't need to copy this, but just to show you understand, so you can absolutely understand this works. If I were to use this with that point, I still get the same answer. So I get 27 equals negative 12, negative 9 plus b. I get 27 equals, I believe that's 108 plus b. You subtract 108 from both sides, and as we saw over here, 108, well, I guess the relationship between 108 and all that is 81, and it is going to be negative for your b. So again, that does work. The key thing you need to know is that this is very important, because what you can do with this, and this is your essential question, which is, what is the benefit of writing equations from random information? Sometimes, or at some point in this chapter, you're going to have what we call scatter plots, and they're going to ask you to draw a line of best fit, which means that you have to be able to take 2 random points and get something that's going to help us to predict what's going to happen whenever we get there. So other than that, go to MathXL and start working on that. Please make sure you understand that I did look at the grade book, not officially to put in grades, but just to see what we're doing. And it's, some of you have not even touched the homework yet, and a lot of you are below the 50% range. You've got to remember that the reason the homework is there is to prepare you for the quiz. So unless you know it's exactly what's going on, my advice to you is this: if you're not getting half of the work done at school, then definitely try to make sure you go home and get half of the work done there. I'm not saying you need to be at 100, but 50% means you at least got some of the stuff done, and that you've at least kind of gotten into the flow with the material. But again, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you might want to make that change, because I think that it could end up badly if you don't. Just try to do your best to make sure you start doing that. Other than that, good luck.